Welcome. This is a slideshow to help people navigate my YouTube channel, which is rather large and complicated. This is a stopgap measure until I can build a website to make this all much easier. Even with intense light, the video is dim, so a new camera is in order. You may stop this video at any time in order to read the slides when that is necessary. Richard Koepsel is a 50-some-year student and aspirant to initiation into the modern Christian mystery school of the Rosicrucian Order. All of that time, he has been affiliated with the Rosicrucian Fellowship of Oceanside, California, though he is not an official voice for that organization. During that period, he has lectured and taught mysticism and astrology. These recordings are a collection of what has been saved from those talks over the years. All of the talks are expressions, explanations, elucidations, and extensions of modern Christian mysticism. The primary influences of Richard Koepsel are, in order of significance, Max Heindel, Platonism and Neoplatonism, especially Plotinus, and Rudolf Steiner. I am more original than orthodox, so some of the expressions may differ significantly from the original source material. All of the talks are informal by intent, and there is a lot of mystical free association in them. There are some errors, as there must be when someone does something new and is growing up. Usually errors are corrected in later presentations. Many of these recordings are audio only, but the audio is the most important part in any case. This map is intended to help anyone who wishes to access this information. It is necessary since there are so many talks of such a wide variety and over such a long time span. Other versions of some of this series are available on request. Thank you for your interest. All of the talks are in three general areas of subject matter, with subdivisions in each of these areas. The general areas are spiritual astrology, hybrids, and mysticism. Breakdowns and descriptions of the general areas are given in the following slides. All of the astrology talks are in series. Each series constitutes a class. Miscellaneous individual talks on astrology have been lost over the years. The following are the series. Topics in Astrology is a general introduction to the elements of astrology. This is one of the must-see series of talks on this channel. It is meant to appeal to those of pedestrian interest as well as people that want to study more deeply. Talks 2 and 3 can be skipped by those who do not want to learn to cast a horoscope. The talks are meant to be as much entertainment as education. Astrological Tools and Techniques is a beginning technical course to help anyone to learn and read and interpret a horoscope. Several techniques, both inductive and deductive, are taught, but most of the class is spent in progressive keywording. The keywords are meant to be keys to open the intuition. A textbook of the exercises used in this course and an extensive selection of keywords is available on request by emailing me at richard.koepsel@gmail.com. Character Appreciation with Astrology is an intermediate level course. It is in 3 sections. The first is all about astrological profiling of the most general descriptors of character. The second section is learning a method of estimating the relative strengths of each of the planets and the relative strengths of each of the aspects. Relative significance is of extreme importance for accuracy in judgment. The third section is an analysis of each of the 4 major character facets: the personality, the emotionality, the mentality, and the individuality and spirituality together. The horoscopes of 16 famous people are used in all sections of this course. A textbook of all of the horoscopes, handouts, and results that are used in this class is available, again, by emailing me at richard.koepsel@gmail.com. Astrology, Psychology, Mysticism is an advanced level technical course. It is a work in progress at this time. It recapitulates the material developed in the previous courses by applying it to the horoscopes of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. It also looks at how psychology and mysticism look at the things found by astrology, such as typology and things like that. After recapitulation, the course delves deeply into a house-by-house analysis of each of the astrological houses. The study is about the nature of the houses and how Freud and Jung and mysticism approached that material and how they lived it out in their lives. A textbook will be available upon completion of the course. The Aspects in Spiritual Astrology is a lifelong study of the subject of astrological aspects. It has gone through an extensive evolution. It looks at the aspects in terms of spiritual geometry, cyclical dynamics, and the astrological mandala, among other ways. It is worth the trouble for someone delving into this most important part of astrology. It is one of the best series of talks of all the astrology talks. Ephemeral, horary, and electional astrology is a study of the character of the moment. The term electional is a neologism that is apt to be included in the lexicon of all astrologers. The ephemeral part of the course is a study of the flavor of time in terms of many cotaneous cycles. In earlier renditions, this section was much more extensive if you are interested. The section on horary astrology is a new and more focused look at divinatory astrology. The section on Astrological Elections is a significant departure and advance from all other works on the subject. It is worth a try, so look into it. It is a modern and scientific way of looking at the subject. The hybrids are mixtures of astrology and mysticism in ways that are complementary to each other. They are of two varieties, blends and medleys. Transitions into the Aquarian Age is a blend in that astrology and mysticism flow into each other. The talks cover everything from the astronomy behind the precession of the equinox to attitudes and actions we can take to be in harmony with the changing spiritual and social background as we enter into and bring on the Aquarian Age. This is another of those must-see series for contemporary seekers. Astrophysiology is a new experimental series of talks that has been given intermittently for the purpose of helping aspirants to spiritual healing. Its future is uncertain depending on time available to me. All of the other series are medleys. That is, they are talks on mystical topics with parallel talks in astrological practice. They are all summer schools. We have a summer school every year for 1 week, usually in August. The order of presentation is in terms of relative importance. So to spiritual students, the first is of the most importance, and so on. Building the soul body is about the nature of the etheric subdivision of the physical world and the corresponding human etheric vital body. The higher ethers form the soul body, which is our vehicle of consciousness when away from the physical body. And in the future, in the Aquarian Age and beyond, this will become increasingly more important. Though not of the best audio quality, this is the most important of all of the summer school series. The astrology talks parallel to this series gives examples from the horoscopes of people that have the various ethers in their body accentuated through their individual evolution. Working on desire introduces the composition of the desire world and the corresponding human desire body, which some call the astral aura. It gives tools and techniques for working with the troublesome lower nature and other things pertaining to emotion, feeling, and desire. The parallel astrology talks take a tour of the desire world and the desire body by using horoscopes of famous individuals that are exaggerated examples of some aspect of the desire world, everyone from mob bosses to saints. Cycles in modern mysticism is a study of the most powerful engine of cosmological development, the cycle. By repetitive cycles, we are exposed to new things and develop inward qualities. The talks work through some of the cosmological cycles as examples. The parallel astrology talks are about the aspects as turning points in the lunation cycle through which we pass every month. Again, examples are taken from famous people born at different stages of this cycle. Consciousness is about the various grades of consciousness and how we awaken consciousness. It is a sometimes difficult series. Special emphasis is placed on how, through daily inner struggle, we awaken to transcendental consciousness. The parallel astrology talks show examples of famous people that, in their planetary nature, show the spectrum of flavors of human consciousness. Spiritual exercises is about modern spiritual exercises. Emphasis is placed on the exercises as being based on cosmological principles, the very principles that create and transform the cosmos and the humans that are products of it. In the same way that spiritual exercises are tools for awakening and developing higher consciousness, the aspects are astrological tools in activity. Horoscopes of famous people are used to demonstrate the use of those tools. Cause and consequence is a brief study of the various outlooks on the principle of action, which is the classical term for cause and consequence. Mention is also made in this series about how grace works into destiny. The parallel astrology talks use the horoscopes of famous people to study how the various degrees of ripe destiny are determined and how, if possible, it can be transformed creatively. Some Thoughts on Healing is an introductory series exploring some of the basic factors in healing. It tries to look at the gamut from spiritual healing to magnetic healing. Some emphasis is placed on the spiritual causes of healing as opposed to the material causes such as bacteria. The parallel astrology talks explore astrophysical homunculi, which are microcosms of the zodiac as found in the body. These homunculi, for example, are found in a zodiac in the bones of the fingers or in the 12 cranial nerves. Not all of these difficult questions are answered in these talks, so this is exploratory. Spiritual coevolution is about our relationship to other evolving life waves, such as angels and archangels ahead of us and the animals and plants following behind us. It utilizes mythology as a means of ingress into this topic. The parallel astrology talks are about the principles of octave planets. It clarifies what planet is octave to what other planet and why. Demonstration of the function of octave planets is through the horoscopes of famous people. The evolutionary creation is an extremely brief exploration of the grand evolutionary scheme as found by seers of the various mystery schools, and especially as found in the Rosicrucian cosmoconception. The parallel astrology talks focus on the horoscope of the speaker, using it to demonstrate the various tools of dynamic astrology, such as directions, progressions, and transits. The Mysteries and the Gospels attempts to demonstrate the thesis that symbols of the mystery schools contemporary or prior to the incarnation of Christ are embedded in peculiar ways in the Gospels. The idea being that one of the works of Christ was to bring all of the mystery schools together. The parallel astrology talks demonstrate how astrology and the most basic elements of astrology, signs, houses, and planets, are found in the Gospels. The unconscious explores how much of our being is unconscious to our daily waking awareness and the nature of the unconscious in our being. It tries to cover the material from our divine being, of which we are mostly unconscious, to the autonomic nervous system. The parallel astrology talks are about the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses, which deal with subconscious, threshold conscious, and superconscious states of existence. Experiences relating to these houses are used through the horoscopes of famous people. Astrophysiology Summer School gives examples of a few simple relationships between astrology and physiology. It is intended to stimulate reverence for our bodies and to begin to prepare people to become spiritual healers. The parallel astrology talks are examples of astrodiagnosis to the same ends. They again utilize the horoscopes of famous people as examples. Most of all of the recordings are about mysticism because I am a mystic at heart, and I consider astrology as subsidiary to mysticism. It is an important part of mysticism, but not of the same central importance as philosophy. There are 3 main definitions of mysticism. The first is that it is an inner approach to reality, differing from empiricism, which is outer. Observation is important in modern mysticism as it has evolved through the Western scientific method, but most of reality is inward. So mysticism is inward. The second definition of mysticism distinguishes it from occultism, which is of the head, while mysticism, by this definition, is from the heart. The third definition is classical. It comes from the Greek mystery schools, where a neophyte aspirant to the mysteries was called a mysta, or hearer of the truth, while the more advanced epop was a seer of the truth. All 3 definitions of mysticism apply to these talks. The talks on mysticism are in 3 areas: mythology, cultural vehicles, and pure mystical philosophy. Mythology is not merely stories about the gods. It is the language of the gods. What is expressed in mythology is too sublime and all-inclusive to be expressed any other way than in such stories that are rich in truth. The original mythographers and interpreters of myths were mystics from the mystery schools. Nowadays, myths are used by psychologists, artists of all the arts, and even astronomers, but not much by mystics. So it was time for these talks. It all started with Joseph Campbell and the series about mythology that he produced for public television in the United States. It was a nice series for its idealism, but it went only as deep as Jungian psychology. So I thought it was time for another voice to be heard, even though it was only a small voice. So for the next several years, these talks were offered. They were some of the most joyous years of my life. I have always intended to return to talks on mythology, but have not been able to find the time to do so. Perhaps someday. Cultural vehicles are used by the exponents of mystery schools to present mysteries philosophy to the world in a manner conducive to acceptance by worldly consciousness. All of the arts can be cultural vehicles. I chose the plays of Shakespeare and Sophocles as excellent vehicles. They allowed participation by everyone in the classes, and they were loaded with major and minor mystical themes. Sophocles was an Eleusinian initiate, and Shakespeare, whoever he or they may have been, was well versed in mysticism. There is loads of mystical free association in these talks. Mysteries philosophy is just what the name says. It is a statement of the philosophy of the modern mystery schools of the West. It is basically an expression, elucidation, explanation, and extension of the mysteries philosophy of Christian mysticism. The talks are of various grades of quality, with the difference coming from the speaker maturing and being able to work into the material. They are quite wide-ranging, and the topics cover many subjects. The later talks are still in progress under the title of Modern Mysticism, one of the most extensive statements of modern Western mysticism available. The mythology talks were a delight for me, and hopefully for the hearer as well. The talks are about mysticism, but according to the themes of mythology. The introductory myths are meant to discuss some of the non-standard ways that mystics interpret myths. They are a statement and a correction. The creation myths are an early attempt to see myths as in the universal sense. With creation myths, this means that they are formulae for the creation of anything from a recipe to an organization or a cosmos. The talks are not especially deep and certainly not mature. Again, it is something to which I would love to return. Mysteries myths are myths which were used by the ancient mystery schools. These talks include the myths of Isis, of Demeter, and of Orpheus, as they were used by the mysteries of Isis and Osiris, by the mysteries of Eleusis, and by the Orphics. They mark a beginning of modern mysteries thinking in all of these series. Myths of Heroes and Heroines is a series about initiation and the work of initiation from as many points of view as possible. The astronomical mythology of the hero or heroine is either the sun or the moon. The protagonist is the candidate for initiation, and the tasks are the trials based on basic human characteristics built into us in evolution. Myths of hierarchy is based on the fact that some things are more important than others. The differences of importance vary from culture to culture, over time, and the progressive development of human evolution. There are many different views of hierarchy. Hierarchy in Hindu mythology is mostly about the trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, but also the hierarchy of other gods and a few tales along the way. Hierarchy in Egyptian mythology follows the birth of the gods, beginning with Re and passing to the Paut of gods that includes Isis, Osiris, Set, Nephthys, and Horus the Elder, using the names given by the Greeks rather than those given by the Egyptians, which are pretty much unknown to most people in our times. Of course, there are a lot of stories along the way. Hierarchy in Greek mythology was one of the joys of my life. It is pretty elaborate, with several theogonies and chains of stories. If you like Greek mythology, I believe you will truly enjoy this series. Hierarchy in Northern European mythology covers the organizations of the gods of Germany, Norway, and other Northern European societies. The series does much more with the change in the evolution of consciousness in humans and the values shown by the chief gods in each of the societies as we have proceeded from India westward. Triangle myths is the start of an ambitious study of Trinitarian thought via mythology. Only 2 myths were studied before abandoning the project for something more agreeable to the listeners. The myths covered are the myth of the myth of Oedipus and the myth of Isis, Osiris, and Horus as told by the Neoplatonist Plutarch. I would love to return to this project someday if time can be found. Oedipus elucidates the most common Trinitarian theme, that of the invisible Father and the union with the Mother to fulfill the self. It is the theme of Trinity that pervades most Christian thought. Isis, Osiris, and Horus treats the theme of the Son seeking the invisible Father and avenging him in the face of the Mother who has changed allegiance to the Father's brother. The invisible Father is common to almost all hero myths. Myths on the origin of evil is an extended study of some of the problems of evil which beset theologians of our time. Everyone believes that good comes from God, but where and how and why evil came into being is a topic of some challenge. These talks explore that. The origin of evil in Eden is a study of the Genesis story of Adam and Eve and their fall through their descendants. It is not standard fare, and it is much more philosophical than religious. Prometheus and Pandora is a brief change of pace to open up the consciousness of the hearers to non-Christian ideas of evil. The origin of evil in Hindu mythology introduces some thoughts of evil which are very different from those of the Occident. These talks do not go into great depth, but they are connected with the basic theme, though there are a few interesting stories on the side. Origins of evil in Persian mythology goes into the perennial struggle of light and darkness, of assertion and negation, by looking into the war between Ormuzd and Ahriman. The elucidation of the theme of this myth influenced much of the work of Rudolf Steiner. Hawaiian Myths is a brief survey of the myths of Hawaii. It looks into rituals surrounding the myths and notes similarities with myths of other societies, such as those of the ancient Greeks, with questions about whether there was direct contact or whether that was even possible, or whether there is something common to all consciousness that produces myths. Welsh Myths is a retelling of the Mabinogion, with all sorts of mystical free association within it. It was a very fun time for me, and I hope it will be for you also. Mystical philosophy is often expressed in principles and diagrams and things like that. In reality, it is not skeletal like that. It is in the richness of life itself. It is in our culture. In many cases, concentrated and grand statements of the mysteries are too much for many people, and homeopathic doses are more effective. Knowing this, mysticism has been injected into culture through cultural vehicles such as the arts. In these talks, I chose to do the inverse, which is to use cultural vehicles to get into mystical reality that is within and behind everything in our lives. The cultural vehicles I chose were plays. This was done because plays have always played a large role in the development of the mysteries, from the ancient Greeks to the modern Freemasons. As a class working together, we grew up. We learned that participation enhances the experience. Some of the audio of the students in the class in the early talks on cultural vehicles is not very good. Two playwrights were used, Shakespeare and Sophocles. Shakespeare is loaded with references, and Sophocles was an initiate into the Eleusinian mysteries, so these seem to be appropriate. I am not a Shakespeare scholar, though there is plenty of scholarship in these talks, and some of it is unprecedented. I am not a Shakespeare authority, though I speak authoritatively as a mystic. These talks are more about mysticism than Shakespeare. It is important that the listener understand that I am not implying that Shakespeare meant the things said in these talks, though in many cases I believe he did. I am not trying to put words in his mouth. I am using words to get at mystical things that are difficult to get at in any other way without being stuffy and laborious. The method of these talks was an evolutionary process. As a class, we grew up together. The talk started as a lecture class only, and shortly we evolved into having everyone participate in reading the plays. At first it was shaky and the audio was terrible, sometimes almost inaudible in the reading part. The lectures are always audible. By the time we got to Sophocles, we had video. The structure of the Shakespeare talks is twofold. First, there is mystical free association on things that come up during the course of the reading. This was perfect to my intent, which was to speak to many different things for which Shakespeare is ideal. The other part of the structure is using the plays to address grand mystical themes parallel to the subject matter of the plays. In this, it is important to note again that the themes are mystical and only parallel Shakespeare. The structure was such that we would read until a topic arose which piqued my intuition, and I would discuss it, after which we would return to the reading. At the end of the reading of each play, there is a theme talk relating to the grand general theme. At the end of the last talk in a theme, there are one or more theme talks. The first theme chosen was the cycles of Christ and Persephone. It includes The Winter's Tale, Julius Caesar, Midsummer Night's Dream, and Hamlet, as paralleling the changes of the seasons at the solstices and equinoxes. The talks discuss the nature cycle of the vital etheric flux which withdraws into the earth in winter and comes out in the spring, much as Persephone was drawn into the underworld and came out according to the seasons in that Greek myth. The talks are also discussing the newer cosmic cycle of the cosmic Christ entering and exiting our earth in parallel with the annual cycle as a great sacrifice. The second theme is magic, white and black. It parallels themes in Macbeth and The Tempest. The former obviously discusses sorcery and black magic, and the latter, white magic, among a whole lot of other things. After the second theme, there was an intermezzo of one play, Antony and Cleopatra. This was done to accommodate scheduling and because the play is very dear to me. There is no main theme in this series of talks, but there is a lot of discussion of the characters as seen astrologically. The final theme is called Love and the Law. It discusses the classic Christian theological debate, which extends to all forms of mysticism, about the coexistence of the law of cause and consequence and grace. It utilizes 4 plays, Romeo and Juliet, Measure for Measure, King Lear, and The Merchant of Venice. Again, there are many little vignettes along with the development of a major theme. The plays of Sophocles do not offer as many releases for improvisation as Shakespeare, but they do offer mythology which can be used to the same end. Mystical gossip has it that Sophocles was reborn 2 lives later as Richard Wagner, the clairvoyant composer who saw colors when listening to notes. It is also not difficult to see the similarities between the characters of the 2 men. The plays chosen were what is called the Oedipus cycle: Oedipus Rex, Antigone, and Oedipus at Colonus. the theme chosen for Oedipus Rex was initiation, which, though it sounds strange, is perfectly apt. Of course, there are again all sorts of other little vignettes along the way. The theme chosen for Antigone was the differences between divine law and human law, which is one of the main themes of the play itself. This fits well with the human-centered nature of Sophocles. The theme chosen for Oedipus at Colonus was redemption, a theme that is dear to all spiritual aspirants who know keenly the suffering of the world in our fallen state, and we all long for redemption. The recordings in the mystical philosophy section of the overall section called Mysticism present a different kind of challenge in navigating this channel. It is that there is a lot of repetition and progressive growth in the different series. This is because I came to understand more of the philosophy as life and personal development went on. Often I was called upon to give general talks, and they became progressively deeper, and the same material was covered more thoroughly, with more and better examples. For this reason, the currently ongoing series called Modern Mysticism is far better than most of the other series that precede it and that are listed in this category, and it is the most highly recommended. The only exception to this is the series called Christmas, Christ, and Christian Mysticism. That series is probably the deepest series of talks I have ever given. It is a little bit immature, but it has plenty of enthusiasm. It could correctly be called Christian Neoplatonism. Many of the elements of these talks can be found in improved form in bits and pieces in other talks, but this is the best full statement and the statement of original intent, as music historians would say. The miscellaneous talks were given at many times in many places, and most of the miscellaneous talks have been lost. Only two of them are of great importance. They are the talk called Our Work and the talk called What's New. They are especially important for aspirants working through the Rosicrucian Fellowship. There are errors in these talks, as there must be. We are all growing up and advancing, and we see problems or errors that we have made earlier. Please be merciful and do send corrections. For that matter, also send corrections for any area that you find where the audio is not good and some things may have to be redone. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this is helpful to you.